Thank you for listening to the Business Blast podcast. So for all my listeners out there that have been wanting to do your own podcast, I'd like to introduce to you Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing, and monetizing your podcast. So before I found Anchor, I had never actually done a podcast because all the research that I had gathered made it seem very complex. Then I found Anchor, and Anchor makes podcasting extremely simple. So if you want to do your own podcast, go to anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. Welcome to the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. This episode is brought to you by Authors Unite. Authors Unite provides you with all the resources you need to become a successful author. You can learn more about Authors Unite and join the free community at authorsunite.com. Now, let's jump into the episode. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Business Blast podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wagner. Today I have Grant Hedges with us, and as a LinkedIn coach, his goal is to give people the advice they need to have an exceptional LinkedIn profile and learn how to network over LinkedIn. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Tyler, thanks for having me.
Of course, pumped to have you here. We'll dive into the first one. The first question I have for you, Grant, is what is the best story from your life that has an underlying valuable message?
Yeah, for me, it's an experience I had a couple of years back. I was working in Richmond, Virginia, and I'd gotten there. I was working a job I hated and really wasn't taking good care of myself. I was drinking heavy, and I remember I woke up one morning and I slept on a mattress on the floor. So I woke up on this mattress on this concrete floor surrounded by beer cans and empty beer cans. And I knew that I had to make some sort of change in my life then. I knew this is not how I wanted to live. I knew I didn't want to be depressed, unproductive, really unsucccessful. And so I decided I had to challenge myself right there to change. And but I didn't really know how. Change is hard, as we all know. And so I decided to change through working out. And so I did what I now call the one push-up challenge. So every morning I would get out of bed, I'd do one push-up because I knew that that's the one thing I could do. And that no matter how terrible the rest of the day was, no matter how unproductive or lazy was, that I'd accomplished that one thing. And the lesson I learned there is that that was a catalyst for change and productivity in the rest of my life. And so the message there is do something, do the tiniest thing, do anything you can to help break yourself out of negative, destructive habits and propel yourself towards a more positive, productive life.
Thank you for sharing that with us. And I totally agree. I actually, one thing that really helps me in the mornings, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's this 5-minute journal. And it's like basically you just like jot down like what you're grateful for in the morning and then some other things. But just like that practice of just being like, okay, I can put 5 minutes into journaling,
Exactly.
like propels you into being like, I can do 10 minutes. You know?
Exactly. Like I can have a productive morning and a productive afternoon, and it's huge.
Exactly. So the next one I have for you, man, and I'm excited for your answer on this, is what is the most valuable piece of information we should know that's within your expertise or industry?
All right, so I got two here. The two biggest things I see people not doing and that I would tell people to do is first, take that first step and actively build a network. I have so many people I know who are wonderful, talented, marketable people who only have 200, 100, or less than 100 connections on LinkedIn. So first take the step and add everyone you know in your field, add anyone you could be interested in, reach out in direct messages, build that network. The second piece of advice I have really to having a successful LinkedIn is to document everything you do and just generate content. If you're at a conference, just snap a photo with some people there, put it up there with some sort of message about it, keep people updated on your career and your life, and start to build your own personal brand and tell your story.
And what is your best piece of overall business advice? You're not necessarily industry specific.
I think overall business advice is to learn how to be genuine and likable. Because being likable is difficult, and I think too many people think that it's a formula. When in reality, if you view it like a formula, you're going to come off as cold and sterile. But take the time to figure out how to be yourself and be the best, most likable, most genuine version of yourself.
And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Let's say fearlessly tackle the awkward situations. Young me was a very shy individual. I was afraid of anything that was outside of my comfort zone. I was afraid of unfamiliar situations. And I was quite frankly terrified of doing anything or asking any question that might be awkward. And the reality is that life is awkward. And if we don't take those risks that could lead us to potentially awkward situations, we'll never have exceptional experiences.
And in your opinion, what is the key to happiness?
I think the key to that is taking the time to know yourself for two reasons. First, if you know yourself, you can learn to be happy with and happy as the person you are now. The other thing about knowing yourself is that if you know yourself, you know your flaws, and you can improve and shape yourself into the person you want to be. And I think being happy with who you are and constantly improving you are keys to happiness.
And what is the best book that you've read, and what was the number one thing you learned from that?
So my really one of the most impactful books I've ever read. I thought to think a little bit about this. I read a lot. I read a lot of literature and poetry and whatnot. And I was thinking about ideas that really impacted me. And one of the books that has a big one, and I apologize for the profanity, but it's the title of the book. It's called "Fuck Feelings." It's written by Michael Bennett, and a psychiatrist rather. And the big message I got from that book, I alluded to earlier in answering your first question, is that change starts with taking incremental steps, and growing to be a better person has to start with acknowledging that you've got areas of weakness that are huge, and instead of trying to change that all at once, you have to say, all right, I have to start with the smallest increment and then begin to grow that way.
And what is your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote was a guy named Jerzy Grigorich. Tim Ferriss quoted him on a podcast I listened to. This guy was an immigrant and a world champion weightlifter. And he said, in talking about life, he said, hard choices, easy life. Easy choices, hard life. And to me, if that's not a sobering reminder for us to just avoid complacency and make hard choices, I really don't know what is.
I love it, man. Dude, thank you so much for coming on. The last question I have for you before we let you go is, where is the best place? I think I already know the answer. Where is the best place for people to find and or connect with you online?
The best place for me is LinkedIn. Just go to my handle is linkedin.com/in/Grant Hedges, or just search Grant Hedges. If that is not your preferred platform, you can keep up with me on Instagram. And really, those are the two places I'm most active online.
Perfect, man. Thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks again for having me, Tyler. Take care.